People, I hope you're doing well, my delovelies, so I've got a few things for you. Not too many, but they may contain science. And Dazzler. She is a very, very clever dog and can count to very large numbers, namely 4, because that's how many she has paws. Mathematicians have alleged there are numbers larger than Dazzler has paws, but to date, this prodigy has been skeptical. And as a recently published article in Nature Human Behavior indicates, Dazzler may not be alone in this belief. There are a bunch of us. What do I mean by that? Well, specifically counting, and counting quickly. Let me give you an example. How many red dots are there in this picture? You probably figured it out near instantly, and I bet you were pretty accurate too. But now, how many blue dots were there? That's a lot harder, and that's because we humans are a lot like Dazzler. We can quickly and accurately count numbers up to 4 or so, but our counting response time goes up pretty rapidly for numbers beyond that, which is why, for instance, typical 6-sided dice have their pips in patterns, so that even if we can't quickly count the pips, we recognize the 6-pip shape. We've known about this phenomenon for over a century, and the rapid recognition counting mechanism is called subitizing, from the Latin word for sudden because, we can count those small numbers real quickly. Quickly enough, in fact, that there's no real difference between how quickly we can register 2 or 4. The question is, how do we do it? Is neuromerosity like a script in our brain that runs really fast each time but scales up for each additional number? So you start to feel the lag and maybe some inaccuracy once you hit 5? Or do our brains really handle quantification differently when it's a number that Dazzler has paws? It turns out there really is a whole field dedicated to how does your brain do math. And fair enough. It's pretty cool to learn how the meat computers inside our skulls work. We've previously covered a little bit of your brain on math when neuroscientists identified neurons that activated during addition and subtraction, and found that different neurons did so for each of those 2 arithmetic processes. Yes, you heard me right. That study looked at individual neurons activating, but we'll get back to that. As in that study, blood flow imaging and brain electrical activity measurements with electroencephalography have been inconclusive to figuring out how we count. Math may be a global process that uses many parts of your brain, but asking, how does this specific type of quantitative reasoning work inside your flesh calculator? Those questions require more precise measurements than our traditional neuroscience tools are capable of. An fMRI may be able to say, oh, that type of math makes blood flow over there in their brain, but it's not quite a fine-grained enough tool to distinguish between these different types of counting. So our scientists in today's paper once again turn to one of the most precise resources neuroscientists have for these studies. And it involves the literally most generous research volunteers I know. People with treatment-resistant epilepsy sometimes need neurosurgery in order to treat the misfiring brain tissue directly. And as part of that, they require intracranial monitoring to measure activity inside their brain, which is a much, much finer measurement than those fashionable EEG hats could ever provide. That makes neurosurgery with intracranial monitoring a rare opportunity to study human cognition. And that's because, honestly, we really are not going to be opening up people's brain skulls when it's not medically necessary. That would violate all the ethics, then make up 6 new ethics, and then violate those as well. So instead, there are these people who need intracranial monitoring, in this case for a preliminary assessment before their actual procedure. And during that assessment, some of them volunteer to assist with scientific research. That means every time we get studies like this, it's because people who absolutely didn't have to, people who were in the middle of literal brain surgery, nonetheless decided to aid the scientific endeavor so that we could understand a little more about how brains work. And then we made them do math. No good deed goes unpunished. So our researchers were deep in the medial temporal lobe, which is one of the many places in the brain where math happens inside you. And as they record these single neuron recordings, they give our patients numbers to judge, flashing a number of things from 0 to 9 on a screen for about half a second, then asking whether they had shown an even or odd number of things. Not even the number itself, just even or odd. And apparently this paper specified 0 is supposed to be even for the purpose of this study. Now, even or odd is the kind of thing that we can instantly do with numbers inside the subitizing range, but we kind of suck at it once we move into estimation land. So as they recorded 801 single neurons in the medial temporal lobe of the brain of our patients, our scientists found that right at 4, there was consistently a boundary. On one side of the boundary, an activation pattern for subitizing. On the other, different neurons activated when estimating. The farther from that boundary, the fewer subitizing associated nerves activated. A whole lot like the preferential firing we saw in addition versus subtraction in our previous May Contain Science. It seems like some neurons just spend their whole little lives waiting to do a very specific kind of math. I can't personally relate to those neurons, but I sure am glad they're there. The authors hypothesized that the subitizing system may be linked to attention and to working memory, which also tend to have a limited capacity of about 4 items. It's possible, then, that a rhyming sort of mechanism governs both how our brains deal with holding on to a few pieces of info in your head and quantifying a few things. So, it's kind of cool to know that we rapid count using a different squishy circuit than when we estimate a number, but is it useful information in any way? Yes, absolutely. By understanding how our brains typically handle numerosity and quantitative reasoning, we have a better understanding of what's going on when people don't handle those math things well, like people with dyscalculia. No, this doesn't translate into some kind of now we can treat dyscalculia sort of thing, but the more we understand the neuroscientific principles involved, the more likely we are to design educational interventions that are actually helpful. In the meantime, though, I'm going to work on Dazzler's estimation skills. Maybe there's more on heaven and earth than Dazzler has paws.